All right, we're going to get started again. Sorry for the short break, but we went a little bit long that last session. And so we want to be as respectful to your time and our speakers' time as possible. And I know we've got some folks on this panel that have a hard stop. So apologies for breaking up your conversations. I promise we'll give you lots of opportunity to talk over happy hour. So put in the work now and you get the fun later. So thank you so much for sticking in there with us. I have to say, I'm impressed with you guys. You have stuck in with us throughout the day, and that's actually a big kudos to you, but definitely one of the reasons is we've got such good speakers. So our next panel is focused on capitalizing on DOE's innovation ecosystem. And as many of you are aware and have experienced having worked at DOE, having worked with DOE, having tried to work with DOE, it's a multifaceted organization. And we have the privilege not only of having heard from the Secretary this morning, but now getting to hear from multiple parts of the organization that really touch capital and the innovation ecosystem. So as is the case with most of our speakers today, their bios are far too long for me to read. They were hard enough to summarize, but I will do my level best with this crew. And so let me just start. So Connor Prohaska, Director of ARPA-E, most recently was the Chief AI Officer. So Connor's actually had some of the best titles, I think, around. Yeah, come on up. All right. And so Connor served both in the Trump 1 administration under Rick Perry, Secretary Rick Perry, and Trump 2 now as head of ARPA-E. So he was Chief of Staff of ARPA-E, and now he's head of ARPA-E. And in addition, he was 6 years as a U.S. Navy intelligence officer and 2 years at the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. So I missed a lot of other incredible opportunities, but just in a quick nutshell, that's Connor. Greg Beard is the Senior Advisor for Department of Energy's Energy Dominance Finance program, which we talked a little bit about this morning with Secretary Wright. Craig got his start at Goldman Sachs, was a managing director at Riverstone Holdings, and then global head of natural resources for Apollo Global Management, and also Stronghold Digital Mining, where he actually had a really fascinating business we were talking earlier, where they took coal mining tailings and turned that into digital mining in an environmental friendly way. Michael Bruce is the Senior Director for Venture Investing at Emerson Collective. Michael and I actually had the opportunity of serving at the Department of Energy together under our friend Andy Karsner. Michael I often like to say, I hope he doesn't mind this, but I mean, I just think this is pretty impressive. Among all of these other impressive things he's done, he was an All-American NCAA champion in swimming at Stanford. And so just to give you a sense of like his, focus and dedication and ability to just work really hard, that's then transcended into his career in finance. He went from there to Credit Suisse to working for George W. Bush, where we were partners in commercialization, and then later was director at Hannon Armstrong. Michael knows anything and everything about financing projects, investing in companies, and so currently in his role at Emerson Collective, he invests in companies and has been doing that for 9 years. Emerson, if you didn't know, is Lorraine Powell Jobs' fund, so Steve Jobs' widow. And Michael serves on a couple of boards there, including also the Clean Energy Buyers Association, which is one of our sponsors. And last but not least, he's on the board of C3 Solutions. So Tate McDonnell is the co-founder of the Energy Infrastructure Alliance Forum, which I hope we'll maybe tell a little bit more about as we dialogue. Yep. And also a partner at Holland & Knight. She led Wilson Sonsini's first successful government relations practice. And so Tate's really kind of been focused on this space since I think I met her. And then Christopher Mowry is a CEO of Type 1 Energy. I met Chris for the first time today. I said, Chris, we need to be hearing a lot more from you around Washington, D.C. in the policy space. He got his start at GE Power and Water, focused on hydropower, then was at Babcock and Wilcox as president of the B&W Nuclear Energy. He was CEO of General Fusion for 5 years and a senior advisor for Breakthrough Energy Ventures. I know we've got some Breakthrough Energy friends in the room, before his current role at Type One Energy. And I'm sure you'll hear more about Type One's specific role. So with that, I'm going to get off the stage and let you have at it.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us today. As the least impressive person on this panel, I get the job to moderate, which I'm really excited about today. So,
But definitely the most influential.
at least I have
She tells us all what to do.
So we're going to start today really telling the story that a lot of you guys in the room know, and a lot of you guys in the room have watched with us over the last 20 years, at least in my career. And that's the U.S. has been a leader in energy innovation for more than a century. As many know, what we've been involved in the development with regard to electrification, nuclear energy, the modern solar cell, fracking, you name it, the U.S. has been involved. But we're at a precipice, and we continue to be at a turning point of what to do in the future. As a lot of people know too, and you hear consistently, that leadership's relied on a partnership between government and the private sector. So what we're going to start on today is really as government representatives or private sector company leaders and investors, how does the innovation landscape today compare to the past? And what are the most important steps we need to take to position ourselves in the next generation of energy? So we're going to start quickly. We're going to do 1 to 2 minutes each on this question. Then we're going to go into more substance from each of the program and each of the panelists. So Connor, kick it off.
Awesome. Well, Drew and C3, thank you very much for having me. Connor Prohaska, I'm the director of ARPA-E, and I'm also the chief AI officer for the Department of Energy. And I lead partnerships for the Genesis mission, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about, and working with Undersecretary Dario Gil as the leader of that. But I think one of the things, being that I was in Trump 45 and now I'm in Trump 47, if I look at the difference between that term and this term, is we just have a very clear understanding of the demand and the need that we have to accomplish and where we need to go in the energy landscape. And particularly being at ARPA-E, where we do the white space type technologies and we do moonshot activities, we've got a much better idea of what technologies exist out there that can get us to hit that goal. And none of this is a surprise to anybody here. It's fission, it's fusion, how we can go attack large-scale geothermal. We're still going to do a lot of white space things and things that are outside of the box, but we need to take big swings at some things that we know can get us to where we need to go. And it's not just power for AI. Power for AI is the sexy thing and what people say. It's power for the United States. It's power for America. It's power for everything we want to do. And how, to use the secretary's term, how can we better human lives across the planet? And how can we lead the way here at the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. federal government? So
Perfect. Greg, most important steps.
So hey, I'm happy that the secretary was here this morning to give his vision. I will just say, hey, we're lucky as a country to have such a gifted person leading our department, and the president was an excellent choice by the president to pick him. So what's different now? So hey, we've rebranded. So we're LPO, now we're EDF, and I think that really, what does that mean? I think if you looked at what was the focus of the past, I think the secretary probably said today, I haven't heard his comments yet, that we were subtracting energy from the grid. We had a transmission and a grid that really wasn't performing. It's already 50 years old and needs trillions of dollars in order to function. And we were setting ourselves up to lose AI. So hey, what are we focused on now? Is affordability. So we were lucky enough to get appropriations through the big beautiful bill, hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're going to use it to make energy more affordable for America. Perfect. With that, that's going to help us win AI. There is no better Jobs Act than cheap or competitive energy prices around the world. And if you have expensive energy, you're going to lose jobs. And then, hey, to the extent we can make the grid more reliable, that's a form of energy security. So I think we have a mission, and hey, not to criticize the past too much, it was a different era, for sure. But now having reviewed like the entire portfolio, I can tell you the question that was not being asked was, hey, what will the impact of this project be on affordability or on reliability? it was just like one question was being asked is how much carbon will this reduce potentially? And hey, we're definitely asking, like, what will this project have on pricing? And does it make sense? You know, will this borrower be able to repay? So it's I'm proud to be a part of it. We have a great team. I'm super happy that we got the appropriations because there was that risk. I think Congress noticed that, hey, these projects didn't really fit with what common sense would suggest that you do. And on a go-forward basis, I promise that they will.
Perfect. Great. Michael?
I'd say it's amazing how much society's interest in energy changes throughout time. It's kind of like watching a ball bounce around the room. When Drew and I were at the Department of Energy together, importing oil was the buzzword of the day. We imported 60% of our oil, and fracking and some of Greg's great work in natural resources definitely helped reverse that one. So America can still do big and great things, but I do think one talking point that needs serious revisiting is that we're going to innovate our way out of this problem. The United States continues to lead the world thanks to our national labs and our great university system in inventing. We no longer have a lead in scaling. China is now legitimately better at it than us. They both have different rules, but they also have trained the last generation to be excellent at scale manufacturing. And so when I sit in my seat in venture capital, it's not enough for our companies to invent. They also have to deliver at scale. And so where can the department partner with the private sector to not only help generate new ideas, but how do we take those things to market at global scale that really matters?
You know I couldn't agree more, but I'm going to move on to Chris.
Well, actually, I've just doubled down on what you just said. I mean, the global energy industry is in a place where it hasn't been for at least a quarter century. And you can say the same thing about the U.S. I mean, global U.S. energy electricity demand really has been flat for more than a quarter century until recently. And when you talk about the innovators, they see this. They see the opportunity. There's more than a $1.5 trillion a year unmet market demand for base load carbon-free energy. And that is the future of energy. And it comes back to who's going to dominate that? Who's going to supply that solution that is economically competitive that can be deployed at scale? And when it comes back to the US, to what you said, we're great at the early stage innovation, partnering with the DOE to get the technologies to the point where they're ready to scale. And that is where places like China eat our lunch, right? And we're at the moment of truth now. I look broadly at nuclear because that's where my career has been for the last quarter century. And I can see all of these technologies that are coming forward. And now a few are finally ready to go. And they're just waiting to get these projects off the ground. And so that's, to me, the real question about how the industry is going to partner with government and DOE to take this last step.
So back to Greg, perfect segue. So Greg, what is energy dominance and why is it an important goal? And then what are the steps EDF's going to take in terms of, you mentioned a little bit already, in terms of streamlining. We've seen it with our clients. It's not scary. It's not terrible. They are being responsible with advancing the portfolio and positioning it for great things in the future. But tell us a little bit more, because I do think there's a lack of knowledge in this industry right now on EDF.
No, you bet. So, hey, for starters, we want to be accessible. So to the extent you have a project, we want to hear about it. And if we can't do it, we want to direct you to the right people inside of government or DOE to get you access to financing, advice, everything from permitting help. We want to be a point of contact to be helpful with the private sector, because the government can be a partner, but it's really the private sector that is going to drive the industry forward. EDF has almost $300 billion of appropriated capital. Like, I guess to answer your question on, hey, what can we do in the nuclear space? The investment tax credit is between 30 and 50%, and we can lend up to 80%. And so I think it's tough to get excited about doing more than that if you're, and so I think the tools that the government is offering are I'm not sure how courageous you need to be to get a 50% tax credit and then an 80% up to 8% loan at Treasuries plus 3/8 for 30 years. So hey, all of the pieces are there, and I think we're seeing industry line up around technologies to access that capital. So I think the incentives that this administration has put in place and has fought for are going to be utilized. And so I can say, hey, I had you found me 6 months ago, I would have been not as enthusiastic. That it is a tall hill to climb. But right now, as we're speaking, the Chinese are busy building about 30 AP1000 reactors, which is our design. And by building that many, they are getting the economies of scale. And we seem to have forgotten how to do that. And so part of the purpose of government is to let the private sector win. But when you essentially shut an industry down, which is kind of what we did here, it takes capital and partnership in order just to get the machine going again, to be able to get the economies of scale by duplicating the design over and over again. So I think not to disparage anybody, but I think we've got about 100 reactors in the US running today, and about 50 different designs. And so, hey, what is a sure way to continue to have expensive, copies, make something novel? So I was just in Texas last week, and with you Texans, it's tough to bet against the ingenuity of an engineer, or particularly a Texan engineer, which is why we have shale in this country, for example. But respectfully stop. Let's just pick a design and build it, 30 times to catch up, and that is the only way that we can drive the cost down enough to make it competitive.
Can I echo one thing that Greg said there, though?
And why don't you also talk about ARPA-E and its evolution while you're speaking?
But we're open for business. And it's not just EDF, it's the entire department, it's the entire National Energy Dominance Council. We're here to help industry succeed. If you sit down with the secretary, if you go have a meeting, one of the things that he will to nauseam talk to you about is how we're here to serve. We're here to help American businesses succeed. I even make a joke with him that we're going to put a little burger counter like they have at McDonald's underneath the Department of Energy sign that says how many people served or how many companies served, because that's the message he wants everybody to take away, is that we at the Department of Energy and this administration is here to help make American businesses and energy succeed.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I want to triple down on those comments and this idea about innovation and when it's time to go pens down. So to switch over to fusion, I think what we need to do in the fusion sector is focus on minimum viable product, right? And not innovate indefinitely without actually building anything.
Yeah.
So we actually need to get shovels in the ground on a first generation set of fusion power plants to demonstrate the technology and then learn from that. So a lot of the things we're doing with DOE, we're trying to shift the focus not from, hey, how do we innovate to continue to refine something that is actually good enough to get started on, but really to focus on how you access the real value proposition with fusion. So our first customer, TVA, if you'd ask them, why are you interested in fusion? They would say, we think it is the opportunity to have nuclear at the price of gas, right? And the idea here is that fusion really doesn't have the regulatory constraints from a safety perspective that fission does. But to do that, you need to innovate, but you got to start somewhere.
Yep.
And so the key to me for all of this conversation is balancing the innovation piece with the infrastructure piece, and that's really the part where I think we need to actually go execute, certainly in the fusion side.
But just like we talked in preparation for this, that's how we're going to be able to drive down the costs in fusion too. And exactly to Greg's point too, that replication is going to be necessary, but we have to be committed. So Michael, I want to go back to you, and for a lot of us have known each other for a very long time, as you can tell. Michael and I have known each other for about 20 years with Drew, and a lot of our early conversations were very much, how can we make these programs more efficient? Now, how can we improve upon them then? When, of course, we went through, I remember at the beginning of 45, people didn't understand the threat that we are facing with China. Now we do. So now we've had a lot of talks about this throughout the years, but why don't you talk a little bit about your perspective of looking at DOE now, and I know you were around at the development of formerly known as LPO, now EDF, but why don't you talk a little bit about streamlining and improving from your perspective?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges we had when we were at the department was speed. We had an urgent national crisis on our hands, and the tools that Congress had given us at the time meant we really couldn't take action for on the vicinity of 3 years. That was patently unacceptable to us. So fortunately, Congress did pass ARPA-E legislation, and I had a hand in pulling that together with Shane. And it was fun to be a part of some of those early dreaming conversations, but also with the Loan Programs Office. One of our observations was DOE was intrinsically a scientific organization. Brilliant scientists. Most of them didn't know the difference between the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange and some of like the fundamentals of the financial system 20 years ago. That has improved. You get people like Greg to come in and run the Energy Dominance Fund. But ultimately, the DNA of DOE is always going to be science and technology. And so one of the things we were focused on is how do we leverage that strength of helping projects that have new technology embedded in them get out into the market, where traditional project finance investors just don't understand technology. It's kind of almost like a mirror image of expertise, where they can manage interest rate risk, they can manage contract risk, they can manage credit risk, but they don't traditionally take technology risk. So we were trying to find creative ways of how do you narrow what the department needed to underwrite, what risks did the government uniquely have a position in underwriting. Sometimes it gets too complicated to make an insurance policy versus a loan guarantee, but when we thought speed was the primary determinant, we wanted to kind of steal, I guess today would be an Elon Muskism of the best part is no part. And so how do you strip as many layers of process out so that you can get to your eventual answer quicker?
Well, and that's where there's a lot more improvements to come and a lot of opportunity ahead too. So on that note, it's perfect tee up for our next question, which is going to go to both Connor and Greg. The administration has emphasized the need to streamline, emphasized the need to improve and move faster on investment and construction, just as we've all talked about here. How are you thinking of streamlining, moving faster, improving the existing programs you're inheriting?
Sure, I can start. For one, it was so bad that to improve upon it is not that big of a that's
we should have you recorded.
That's the truth. Well, if it takes you 2 months even to hire attorneys to work on a deal, like the private sector would have the deal, diligence, reviewed, executed, and closed in the time that it takes even for us to get lawyers in-house. So we're just changing the way we're doing it. So that one example, hey, we're going to hire, probably 3 different firms. And so instead of having to hire a law firm for each project, hire a law firm, say for the next year, 18 months, you're going to be a law firm that looks and screens all of our deals. That way we're, 2 months ahead of where the last guys were.
That's a great one.
When you apply, instead of discovering when you apply that you have to do this laundry list of items, explain to applicants even before they apply, hey, here's what we're going to look for. And that can lop off weeks or months. Yep. So I think what took at one point 18 months to get done, it should not take more than 4 months to get a loan done. Like, we're not inventing anything new. We're not really making any new documents. We are just going down a very, very well-traveled road that the private sector does, hundreds of billions of dollars per day. And so it was really just by choice. So I think just to, there's a chance that as a strategy, hey, how do you sort of gum up an administration? Just have things take forever. And so, they just run the clock out on them. And that's not gonna happen here. We're gonna modify the systems which are already underway. We're structured staffing. We're looking at every aspect of it, just to make sure that we deploy this capital because it's so important for the country that we do.
It's so important.
ARPA-E does this pretty darn good already.
Yeah, they do.
And so, in no small part to, Shane Kaczynski sitting over there, who was the the deputy of operations, and the system that's been designed at ARPA-E. ARPA-E does it really well. I mean, we do things fast. When the front office wanted a critical minerals program, we got one out the door in 6 weeks. We move fast. What we haven't done is we haven't, in my opinion, successfully at ARPA-E, taken those lessons learned and translated them down the street, down to, for those that don't know, ARPA-E's office is over here and HQ's down there, and take them to Forrestal and put them into the other offices.
Please,
I think we can do that better, and we're going to do that better, and we're going to make sure that those lessons get translated as well as they can. RPE has very unique statutory authorities and things like that, but some of this stuff we can do better down at the big building that we do really well at RPE, and I'm very proud of at RPE. I'd also say that not only doing that, but if I put my Genesis mission hat on, we're going to look at different consortiums, different other transaction authorities, different ways of doing business, because that's what's going to be required for the goals that have been set forth in the Genesis mission and in the AI activities that the secretary, that the president, and that we want to accomplish. And we've just got to. We just can't work at the speed of government. We've got to work at the speed of business, which is cliche, but it's just true.
No, and I should, I know in the introduction, my title is stated as Executive Director of EIAF, so I should use this as a quick intro to that. The Energy Infrastructure Alliance is a new nonprofit that was actually formed after writing a paper with Michael and C3 in advance of the administration coming in to talk about how we can start to look at things from the past and apply them again to move everything faster. We are at this critical point in time, and we need industry to come together with Capitol Hill, which is part of what this new group will do. So just FYI, if you see it out there, it's really to help facilitate and make a lot of these improvements that have been discussed here, but also expand, because we're going to need the next generation of these programs as well. We simply can't keep up with where China's going right now.
I'd also throw out, I saw Rick somewhere, but we've got, the Foundation for Energy Security and Innovation is a new tool that we're still all trying to collectively figure out how we're going to utilize that. But it's a new tool in the toolbox for how we can finance these things, how we can make partnerships, how we can move things forward.
Perfect. Okay, one more question to you guys before we come back to this side of the panel a little bit more. Let's talk a little bit more about the priority areas for the administration that we haven't touched upon. So I know we talked a little bit about Genesis mission, but what else is the administration thinking with regard to supercomputing, and what does the private sector need to do to better develop and scale these technologies?
Well, I think we're trying to open this up as much as we can with our RFP that is out on the street for siting data centers at some of our properties and some of our lands, whether it's national labs or sites that exist. But we're trying to open up as much as we can and make as many opportunities possible as we can, in the hopes that it also is a co-beneficial relationship, right? So the data centers drive new forms of energy generation and technology. So that's the first start. And part of it, particularly with the Genesis mission, is this idea of some of these companies, look, we'll make it easier for you to build something big. We're going to take some of those cycles, we're going to take some of that power, some of that AI capability, and then you get some of it as well. And how can we, maybe you put the CapEx in, we do the OpEx, and make unique situations that are beneficial for the company, beneficial for us. And this doesn't just become, as people have heard me say multiple times, but it's not just an all of DOE effort for the Genesis mission. It's not an all of government effort. This is an all of country effort, because we're moving to a place that's pretty remarkable, where the Department of Energy is not going to have the fastest computers in the country or in the world anymore. It's going to be private industries that have these. So how do we leverage those, and how do we make those work? But we want to do big things, and Greg does big things. So.
But that's how you got all your fancy titles. But Greg, over.
So I think first thing we have learned already, is stop subtracting. So how do we keep more assets online for longer instead of turning them off? So if you need 100 gigawatts, don't shut down 50 gigawatts that are current baseload power and then need 150 gigawatts of power. So number one, stop doing dumb things. So add instead of subtracting. Because we are in a generational battle.
That's why we need you here, Greg.
I'm sure this will be quoted heavily. So how do we help with this pool of capital? One, you can look at long lead time items for nuclear. That's a longer time frame, but existing uprates for existing nuclear plants, that's an important focus area. Keeping coal plants online, offering capital to refurbish and lengthen the life of those assets if possible. Taking assets or jurisdictions that have that had a, say, predilection to doing intermittent power and sort of asking them, hey, study your grid and let us know how we can lend to replace that intermittent power plan with baseload power. So that might be LNG, for example. I think it's been public that we're focused on Alaska LNG. We have the amount of resource in Alaska is a generational type of resource. So getting that to the global market is beneficial. We're also focused on like geothermal. We're focused on any technology that will make the grid more reliable, make energy cheaper, help us win AI, make it more affordable. Like that is the, really the hurdle to get over to get access to this money.
I simplify it one more step, which is let's do things that don't kill people. If we pollute the world, we kill people. If we don't have enough energy, we kill people. So let's not do things that kill people. Like that's principle one. we can grow off that.
I think we all agree. Okay, Michael, before I go to Christopher on the technology side, anything else to add from your time in government? I mean, you understand the underlying mechanisms. I always joke with folks when they say, we got to move faster. DOE is going to do all these different things. And I always say, we still have underlying statutory requirements that we can move faster on and we can be more flexible with. But you understand those. But you also understand the needs in the market. Anything else to touch upon?
Yeah, I mean, back to my prior comment that speed is so important for me recommending that my companies engage with the department. Traditionally, I've always told my companies, think of DOE engagement as plan B.
Yep.
It might be a fun upside case, but it's not the way you run your business. And if we really want to move markets, we want to get the private sector to behave differently, we need to move in a way that it can become plan A. I do think the department made some great forward strides on updating the way they engage with the private sector in the kind of the closing days of the last administration by a more muscular exercise of other transactions authority, and in particular with the fusion effort, doing a milestone-based funding program. So rather than CRADAs where they're funding up front, they are giving a prize at the end for when you actually knock down a milestone and saying, private sector, figure out the most efficient way to get from A to B, do it as fast as you can, and we'll pay you when you get there. I think that would be a more effective way of engaging with people in my seat. Because DOE was really built around how do you deal with GE, how do you deal with ExxonMobil, how do you deal with big corporations that kind of time doesn't matter to them as much. But when you're dealing with a venture capital-backed company that I'm only funding them to get to the next milestone. They very well may run out of money before DOE can figure out how to run the Xerox machine. And we had one, I think, kind of acute example in our portfolio that we had a company that won a critical minerals grant. And then in the negotiation found out they needed to do a full EIS, so 3 to 5 years worth of investigation to build a demo facility. And they just walked away. They said, not worth our time. It was a dry hole, all that
they probably didn't need that.
Hunting was wasted, and it was really a shame. Now here we are, scrambling, trying to figure out how do we do critical minerals faster. So some of that, we just need to update our priors. Yep. What were we solving for when we wrote these rules? And then let's revisit them and write them for the current challenges, the current era. Perfect.
I love it. Christopher, one of the sites announced for data centers development and energy infrastructure is Oak Ridge. You guys have a partnership with Oak Ridge that's advancing. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about the prototype that you have, as well as how you foresee better collaboration with DOE that can help the fusion market advance in particular?
Well, we actually selected Eastern Tennessee and the Knoxville area specifically for the opportunity to partner with DOE, the lab, Oak Ridge National Lab, as well as the sites we had on TVA as a lead customer. And we're actually, relative to the data centers, we're actually partnering with AMD on this opportunity because AI and fusion are kind of inextricably linked here, especially on a global basis, right? You look at places where the big hyperscalers are looking to deploy data centers. A lot of them, at least still today, are closed to traditional fission. And so if you want to address that need, I think that's one of the opportunities you have with fusion. But as it relates to the lab in Oak Ridge, again, going back to what I was talking about earlier, This company, Type 1 Energy, that we put together with Breakthrough Energy's lead investment, is singularly focused on a minimum viable first-generation product with the thesis that the fundamental technology elements already exist. It's a matter of assembling and refining them and using existing materials and know-how. So that drives a specific engagement model with the lab, which is not so much, hey, let's work on inventing a new material. That's important for the next generation, drive cost out. But what's really important now is to access capabilities that the labs have. So for example, with the lab right now, we're doing a tech transfer on the fueling system.
Yep.
Secondly, another great example, which actually is a crossover with another huge innovation that the US has made on the fission side, which is TRISO fuel for Gen 4 reactors. So we've innovated that concept, working closely with the lab to basically create a version of TRISO for fusion that is one of the unlocks for actually being able to move forward with a practical fusion power plant today. And so I guess the message here really is that we have taken advantage of some of the shifts that have occurred here in DOE to basically change the engagement model from this traditional R&D partnership to more accessing the know-how that exists in the lab in order for us to be able to move faster. This is about speed, right? This is a race. And again, the thesis here, at least in fusion, is that what is somewhat unique about the US still today is that the collective set of technologies needed to architect an actual viable fusion power plant is somewhat uniquely resident here in the US. And so China is pouring billions of dollars into fusion, and they're doing what they do well, which is starting building things. But there's a window here that we have, because what China is building is, if you peel the onion back there, that technology is really not ready for prime time. And so they're trying to commercialize something that's not really commercially viable. Whereas I think here in the US, we have the pieces, if we move fast enough, to actually lead.
Yep.
And this is a window that is only going to be open for a certain amount of time. And this, I think, for this to work, we need to pull together all of the threads and weave this tapestry of private sector partnering with government in a way that it hasn't before. And I think the first threads are kind of coming together with the lab piece. Now we need to broaden it and look at how we actually deliver this TVA project.
Yep.
And I'd say fusion, just like I mentioned with AI, to the point, is the United States has the capability of doing that here, and our private industry partners are going to be the ones that drive this forward. And if you look at our fusion roadmap, the announcement of the fusion and quantum offices under the Undersecretary of Science, we're building those things to make sure that we continue to take advantage of that window that exists for just a very short time. We just had an industry roundtable on Monday of last week about all of this and how industry and the department need to work together.
I mean, the three big unlocks for fusion, right, are number one, supercomputing. And we have had the benefit of being able to access the Frontier and the Summit machine at Oak Ridge. That's one of the reasons we went there first. So in terms of using it to architect a practical fusion power plant, that has leapfrogged the position we're in right now to basically being at the forefront. The second piece is the fueling system that I already mentioned. And the third piece was actually innovated at MIT, I think with support from the department back in the day, which is high temperature superconducting magnet technology. Those are the three unlocks for first generation fusion power plants. They're all here in the US.
All available within reach
Yes.
to stay as a leader, a global leader. And that's really what's critical, right? We have this, during the last administration, there was a lot of, we're in a moment of time, and it was because the legislation passed. Here, we're in a moment of time because the needs ahead of us, the technology finally coming to a certain readiness, and we have the know-how and understanding of these programs to do big things, but we're just gonna have to do them, and we're gonna have to do them fast. So I wanna leave time for questions, but why don't we go through each panelist and feel free to just touch upon things we've missed that we haven't talked about yet. And also, really, I know we've talked a lot about what's to come in 2026, but what are you most excited about versus what do you need from industry in the room, too? So, Connor, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think
And get questions ready.
we've hit on some of it. I mean, even just the high temperature capabilities that exist in the fusion industry. ARPA-E is very proud of our history of doing those kind of what I call peripheral technologies that have been the key unlocks and the enablers to go forward. And so what I'm excited about in 2026, to be very blunt, is to continue that work, because I think that's a place where ARPA-E can continue to make an impact, is in particular fusion. I talked about some fission and some fuel cycle projects that we're going to be looking after, because that's a place where we can enable that industry. And then continuing to look at the white space, as we call it, and being the technology scouts for the department and making sure that we're leaving no rock unturned, doing some things that may not make sense and doing some things that do. So that's our job. That's where ARPA-E is supposed to play. And I think that this is going to be a very exciting year. We've got support from the White House, from the Secretary, from the Hill, and I think it's full steam ahead.
And implementing lessons learned.
And
Yeah.
moving best.
I just want to reiterate it because
Well, no,
I think really
it's just,
good.
you know,
Yeah.
I like to say we wave the pirate flag, right? But part of waving the pirate flag is not just in the technology that we explore, but how we do business. And if we can find new ways of doing business for the department and for the entire federal government, we need to share that news.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Greg?
2026 will be a great year. This week, we're taking almost $30 billion of projects to our internal committee, and those are projects that will end up closing hopefully in the first in a quarter or so of next year. We're freshly rebranded, and with that, at some point, we'll announce how much modifications and how many withdrawals or cancellations that we are overseeing, done by the last administration, and really just refocusing on what we know is the best thing for the country. And then I'm hopeful that in pretty short order we'll have announcements around locations and partners for sort of the restart of the large-scale nuclear program, which is an important.
And I do want to, when you say, I know some of the misconception we're seeing in the market is EDF and what the Trump administration wants to do with the EDF, specifically on the technology. Do you want to just touch on that so people know who should be coming to you? Because I do think that's something we're getting a little confusion in the market about.
Yes, that's a great question. So one of the executive orders was to get 10 large-scale reactors under construction by 2030. And so that there aren't many designs that we would say would qualify for that time frame. For the smaller scale reactors, hey, if you have a complete design and are well capitalized, we want to support you. So, talk to us. But hey, we're not a venture debt fund. So if you don't have a complete design, we can't use taxpayer money to really do what your equity is designed to do. And you can argue, hey, this industry, hey, we're the greatest country in the world in part because we have such deep capital markets. So I think the valuations of some of these earlier stage nuclear companies is tens of billions of dollars. So hey, take that private capital and get your design complete and then come. And we would be happy to be a partner with you. But if coming too early just means we're going to say, well, I don't want to have to explain why we lost money. So don't, we just won't put ourselves in that position. But we want to support those that are ready.
But more broad interest too, right? Not just nuclear, or more broad or?
Oh, no, broader. Hey, we've reorganized the group to focus on what we call verticals. So nuclear is one, utilities or grid is another, hydrocarbons is another, critical minerals, yet another, geothermal. So I think you could sort of sort, if you really wanted to map out EDF, go to YouTube and just type in Chris Wright and or President Trump energy policy, and it will not be a mystery where we're focused.
It actually makes our job a lot easier. The president and the secretary have told us what they want us to focus on. It's pretty clear. We're not hiding the ball here very much.
I love it. Exactly what I wanted to make sure we covered to make this valuable for everyone. Michael, 2026. What else? But what else did you not get to say yet? As well.
So the next panel is energy for AI. I'd actually like to shine a spotlight on the opposite of that, of AI for energy. And we are in the venture capital community kind of exiting the large language models for AI era, and we're more focused on like, what can it do next? How can it manipulate the built environment? How can you accelerate your pacing through the FEL schedule to be able to get final plans so you can go talk to Greg? Also, physical AI, so robotics. Out in California, you can now take a ride on Waymo up and down the San Francisco Peninsula, and there was an article out last week about how much safer it is to have the computers drive for us. And so I think you're going to see in 2026 a lot of these technologies that have been percolating about become consumer applications that are going to be used in the real world.
Christopher?
Well, like Secretary Wright, I'm an optimist. So 2026, we're going to get the first commercial fusion power plant project financed, infrastructure financing, working with DOE and the government. And speaking of speed, I just want to reiterate, one of the reasons that you can actually realistically put a shovel in the ground in 2028 is that by law in Tennessee, as part of the regulation in the US for fusion, they have to give us an operating permit within, well, actually TVA, an operating permit within 6 months. 6 months of the application. And so that just fundamentally changes the timescale. The opportunity to scale this technology is by using this technology, the benefit of the technology, in order to move quickly. So I think our job on the private side in 26 is to continue to de-risk the path to execution. So we have this partnership with TVA. They're going to be the builder and the operator. I don't need to reinvent how to do that. We've established a partnership with AECOM, who's actually the engineer on the ballroom over here. They're our power plant engineering partner. We're starting to work with Westinghouse, who has expertise in this. So this is really about pulling together all the capabilities that exist in this country to de-risk it, and then using that de-risk execution model to actually get this project financed and accelerate work that's already started.
Great, great, perfect. Thanks, guys. Okay, questions from the audience? Nothing, I knew it. There can't not be any questions. Oh, there we go. I knew, or I was going to have.
All right, Ethan.
I had to jump up. Hey, I'm Ethan Zindler with Bloomberg NEF. Quick question for about the new Energy Dominance Financing Office. And in terms of your risk tolerance going forward, I mean, you look at the history of the LPO, they funded experimental technologies, in some cases had some wins and some pretty high-profile losses. And then they also funded a bunch of fairly conventional projects back after the financial crisis. You were joking earlier about how you don't want to lose money, but isn't losing money part of the process? And what are the technologies you're willing to take the biggest risks on?
Hey, that's a great question. So you probably remember Solyndra. That was more than 10 years ago. And that was only, on a relative basis, about $500 million. And so I would say the risk tolerance is greater than zero. But we're really supposed to attest that we're not going to lose money. So I think, number one, let's make sure that we are aligned with what the borrower wants to do, right? So should we lend money to a technology that takes some vegetable byproduct and turns it into jet fuel for $13 a gallon, when you can buy jet fuel for $2.50 a gallon in the regular fossil fuel market? No. So I'm not really interested in risking taxpayer dollars to prove that we can do something that's not affordable. So we're going to ask the question, hey, is it affordable, and should we be doing this anyway with taxpayer dollars? In terms of what is the risk that's worthwhile, hey, if you have a technology that is revolutionary and we won't lend to it, but it truly is worthwhile, that's why it's a department. We're not the only office, and we have thousands and thousands of scientists to help underwrite, and it might be that you should get a grant. It's to the extent that we want to do it but can't do it because we think, hey, this might be a money loser, I think we'll still do it as a department, but it doesn't need to be with the appropriated dollars to EDF.
Can I just add something to you touch on something that is incredibly important here in the context of energy dominance, because the stuff that is zero technology risk is by definition a commodity to some degree. And you can just look at, and we talked about this earlier, so Gen 3 Plus fission, AP1000, that is not something that's unique to the US. And I think yeah, we might build a lot more AP1000s. In fact, we should. I'm a big fan of AP1000. AP1000 U.S. will not dominate the future of energy globally with AP1000 because China has it, and it's going to be tough to compete with them on price globally. If you want to dominate the future of energy, you're really talking about the next wave of technologies, whether it's Gen 4 fission, whether it's fusion, which by definition, there will be a first of a kind. And if the U.S. doesn't have the risk appetite to fund these first of a kind projects in the U.S., guess what? It's not going to happen in the U.S. And we will not dominate the future of energy because we cannot solve that fundamental issue, which is where does the infrastructure funding for these first of a kind projects come from that do have some risk, but really represent the future? And this is the threat, I think, fundamentally that we haven't solved in the private sector government partnership here, which is the private sector is now, whether it's us in fusion with TVA or some of these Gen 4 projects, they're first of a kind. And are they going to happen here in the U.S.? And is therefore the U.S. going to dominate the future of energy? Or is it going to be China or Europe that actually steps up and does this? This is what we have to solve. This is the key challenge that we're facing.
And we're fortunate to have folks here. Any other questions before we wrap up? Oh.
Hi, thanks very much. Question about commercialization. I've heard Michael talk about he knows the plumbing. So if one could go through the stages from having a great idea in the garage to getting out into the marketplace, could we show how it works its way through these various agencies?
I'm happy to take a swing at this as the former chief commercialization officer for the department. This isn't, it's not a smooth transition. There's not a smooth pathway. If we talk about, when Breakthrough Energy Ventures was created originally, it was going to be this, with a lot of RPE alumni, by the way, it was going to be this smooth handoff. They were going to be super early, have a little philanthropic blend to it, and it was going to make it easy. And that still that gap between RPE type technology, what we use as tech readiness levels or TRLs, moving to venture capitalists, there's still a gap. There's a big gap. And also on scale, the difference between my $2 or $3 million per project that ARPA-E does and what Greg does, up to $1 billion or only over $1 billion, right? And everything in between. It's just not a smooth formula that exists. And I don't think there ever will be, and that's why this is tough. We're not doing easy things at the Department of Energy. We're doing hard technologies, hardware, not software mostly, that is difficult to scale up. And when we get it right, and it's awesome, and we get things like the fusion industry that exists, and then some others just kind of, aren't necessarily going to happen, but our job as the federal government is to do the things that nobody else will do, because as Ronald Reagan said, sometimes the basic sciences, even though you don't really know what you're going to do with it, at the end of the day, 20 years later, it ends up being the most impactful thing you can do. I mean, we're studying neutrinos and dark matter and things that we don't know exactly what the impact's going to be, and we don't, unlike the Department of War, we don't have a customer at the end of the day at the Department of Energy. We do these things for the betterment of humanity in a lot of cases. When we talk about our basic research missions. And so it's difficult, but I think we're very clearly being more transparent about it at the department, which I think is going to improve that process and get more commercialization activities out the door and moving forward. So I know that's not an answer, but it's a tough nut to crack.
Couldn't agree more. So I will be cognizant of the time. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope this was helpful to learn a little bit of new information, old information, fusion. I know I learned a lot, and I always enjoy this crowd, so this crew and this crowd. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you to speakers.
All right, so we're going to jump right into our next panel. I'm David Kemp. I'm a research fellow at C3, and it's my pleasure to introduce a conversation that's at the center of current energy policy debates and has been looming over all of our discussions so far today. As AI use accelerates and data centers continue to expand, questions are emerging about how this growth is putting pressure on our electricity systems and on energy affordability. We don't yet know how this transition is going to unfold, but it's becoming increasingly clear that we're entering a pivotal moment, one which will require thoughtful policy, careful planning, and flexibility to ensure that our energy systems are ready. So we have a great panel that's able to share some of their experience and insight on how to provide energy for AI moving forward. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Rich Powell of the Clean Energy Buyers Association. Oh, sure. Michael Catanzaro, CEO of CGCN. Rick Stockberger, CEO of the Foundation for Energy Security and Innovation. And our discussion today will be moderated by Kyle Danish, partner at Van Ness Feldman.
Well, thank you, David. So this panel will require some specialized knowledge. Raise your hand if you've heard of artificial intelligence, also known as AI. Okay, I think we're going to be fine. So thank you for joining us for this panel, which I think is going to be great. We have some real experts in the development of projects and policy around energy and AI, and we're going to talk through some solutions that are available to achieve AI dominance while making sure that energy remains affordable and reliable. Rich Powell, CEO of Clean Energy Buyers Association, after a decade or two of largely stagnant electricity growth, load growth is now projected to surge. At the same time, energy affordability is quickly becoming one of the leading issues in DC and around the nation. So is AI the culprit? Is it the solution? How much should growing prices be blamed on data centers? What are the policies needed to safeguard electricity affordability and reliability moving forward?
Well, there's a lot there. So first, let me say thank you, Kyle, for doing this, bringing us together. A huge thank you to the C3 team for convening this fantastic series of conversations on these topics. Just very quickly, Clean Energy Buyers Association, we are the voice of the energy buying community in the United States and increasingly around the world. And we do have all of the hyperscale data center operators and many of their co-location partners in our membership. So we're very deeply engaged in this conversation. So for those of you that haven't been tracking this as closely, everything Kyle just said is a pretty striking reality. So we went for 20 years from 2007 to 2023 with something like 0.5% or less electricity growth annually in the US. And in 2024, that 5x. So we had something more like 2.5% growth, sometimes 3% growth, or by some measures 3% growth. Ethan can correct me on these figures. And it looks like 25 will be in that vein as well. And every projection shows for the next decade at least that we'll be back into significant growth mode. So that is being driven as the single largest contributor by new data center load coming in around the country. Although I should note industrial electrification is a major driver as well. And so we also have members in the heavy industry and advanced manufacturing segments, folks like Micron, that are putting in new semiconductor fabs around this country that are often the same size as those large data centers and are obviously very much tied up in that same conversation. So what does all this mean for load growth? So I think we'll see something on the order of 100 gigawatts of new load growth from data centers by the early 2030s. That's not the 500 gigawatts that are in interconnect queues, that are in load connecting queues around the country. The vast majority of that is speculative activity. The vast majority of that are people looking to get places in line that other people will come and occupy in the future. But we think something like 100 gigawatts is sort of real growth in that system, and probably another 50 gigawatts of growth will be on top of that from everything else, from industrial electrification and very modest vehicle electrification and residential electrification and all that. And that's 150 gigawatts of net new load we'll have to serve, even at the same time that we're retiring a lot of firm capacity around this country. So it's quite a challenge to build enough electricity to keep up with all that. To your very last point about affordability, I think the key things now are we going to reform our permitting systems at the federal level and in the states and the regions and the power markets so we can actually build the new generation and all the transmission infrastructure fast enough to meet that demand? And can we find models to make sure that all of this happens equitably around the country so that folks like our members pay their fair share, or I would argue in some cases more than their fair share, for all of that new transmission infrastructure and gear and all that that's going in, without putting undue burden on residential ratepayers around the country. We actually see already some of the places in the country that have the very deepest data center build, so places like Virginia that have some of the lowest power rates in the country, and that has a lot to do with very, very large rate bases like data centers being able to sort of share the costs for all those transmission upgrades and last mile wires. So I think done well, this can actually be a really good news story for affordability. We are going to have to make sure that it's done well around the country as we do this big build out.
So as much as AI is sort of a draw on electricity and on this demand and the need for load growth, can it also provide solutions in that race to make electricity affordable and reliable for people?
Well, so absolutely, if you're distributing your fixed grid costs across more data centers, that can absolutely help, one. Two, a lot of these folks can bring flexibility to grids that sometimes can limit the need for new peaking generation capacity. So if your data center could come and it can agree to ramp its utilization down a couple of hours a year, or put in energy storage on site so that it can use that for a couple of hours a year, or pay for other people in the grid to do flexibility in their systems a couple hours a year, you can avoid the need for a lot of the expensive new generation. Also can help a lot. And then I think we're only scratching the surface of the incredible things that AI itself is going to be able to do to optimize the structure and functioning of our existing grid. There are already really interesting early stage deployments in two of our biggest power grids in this country, in both PJM and in MISO. They're using AI-enabled services, respectively Tapestry and Pearl Street, to optimize their interconnect processes and to just run their grids far more efficiently than they have already. So I think we're only at the beginning stages of how much more we can get out of the grid we have today.
Thank you. Rick, you're the CEO of the Foundation for Energy Security and Innovation. There was some discussion of FESI in the prior panel. You're also someone with experience incubating new energy technology companies. Can you tell us a little bit about what FESI's role can be in bringing new technologies to the market that could help meet this expected load growth, or load growth that's already underway?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks so much, and thanks to the C3 team and everybody for having us here. I am so excited for this new foundation, right? We're the 13th agency-related nonprofit foundation, so there's 12 other of these types of organizations, but we are really the philanthropic partner of the Department of Energy. My lawyers make me say the independent agency-related nonprofit foundation, I think is what the lawyers say. It's great marketing tool, by the way. Like, everybody knows exactly what that means when I say it. Some of the other foundations across the board that you've seen are like FNIH, who's done biomarker consortiums, as well as Operation Warp Speed in the first Trump administration. InQtel, which commercializes early stage technologies for the CIA. And so there's a very clearly worn path for the work that we can do as an organization. The way that I am kind of thinking about it, and I love new things that happen. So I was watching a documentary on Lewis and Clark recently, and they kept saying throughout the thing, they're on a mission from Congress. And I very much see that as our organization, that we are on a mission from Congress to be able to help industry work with the Department of Energy in many ways and be able to do it faster, better, and better for the country, and be able to have this kind of big picture framework for the United States and how we're going to deploy energy technologies, how we're going to meet the needs of ratepayers and industry from that standpoint. So as I'm thinking about our strategic priorities, mind you, I'm in month 5 here. I just moved from Ohio, the great state of Ohio, I believe is what I'm supposed to.
Your lawyers told you to say that.
Yeah, my lawyers told me to say that. Also, sometimes I like to call it the foundation. I had to borrow that from the Ohio State University. But with that said, so the way I'm thinking about projects and the work that we do is really around speed, scale, and stability. So first off, speed. What can we pilot as an organization rapidly to create tools that help us meet these needs? So when I look at speed of government, and I think everybody's talked about like government moves too slow. In some ways, government moves too slow purposefully, which is a good thing in many ways. But we as an independent agency-related nonprofit foundation, see I can say it faster every single time, really have an opportunity to create these small pilots and then decide if we're going to scale them in the house or find other partners externally to scale them. So one of the things that we're thinking about and looking at overall, anybody tried to work with the national labs? Ever? It's super easy. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but part of the mission from Congress, I won't make a Blues Brothers reference, I swear, because sometimes I think we're on a mission from God too. But part of that mission is around the national labs and being able to help industry work better and faster with them. Helion recently, said they're going to do this lab donation program, and we're trying to figure out how do we just donate money or equipment to a national lab and have it be multi-purpose and multi-use by industry. That's been hard for them to be able to figure out. So that's an area that we're looking at and seeing if we can partner with NREL Foundation, which is Foundation for their national lab, or NREL has a new name, and I don't remember it right now. But
Rockies.
Pardon? Rockies?
The National
Laboratory of the Rockies.
Yes.
Thank you, Rich.
Yep.
So that's kind of that area that we're looking in, seeing how we can do that for all the national labs and make a donation process that works faster. So speed, scale, being able to do things big once we figure it out, and stability is kind of the last area that is really, 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 really important. I am not a political appointee. To be very, very clear. But as an organization, we're very fortunate to have the Secretary of Energy, the Undersecretary of Science, the Undersecretary of NNSA, and the Chief Commercialization Officer of Department of Energy on our board, and serving on the board as an ex officio member. So as I'm thinking about things that we do as an organization, and while I'm taking feedback from industry on the things that they would like to see, I like to think on a decade. What does industry want to do for the next decade in energy? That is beyond a political cycle, right? And making sure that we can amass capital at scale that will last longer than 4 years. And so that's kind of where we're approaching this area, is around speed, scale, and stability as an organization, and making sure that we are a good partner to industry to be able to enable the federal government to do great work that furthers the future of the United States energy infrastructure.
Thank you. Mike Catanzaro, CEO of CGCN. I think of you and your firm as having a real pulse, a finger on the pulse of Congress and the administration on these issues. We're heading towards a big move to the end of the year, as we heard in a prior panel today with Representatives Malloy and Pfluger on permitting reform. What are the permitting reform bills that you think are particularly crucial to ensuring we have energy for AI, and what do you think are the prospects for these bills?
Well, it's great to be here. It's awesome to be on this panel, and thanks to C3. I have talked about permitting reform ad nauseum, as some of you in this room have heard me talk about it. Rich made fun of me as we walked in here talking about permitting reform all the time. But
we kid because we love.
That's
it's
right.
Good.
That's
That's
good
good.
because we love. We love permitting reform. We
love your focus.
Yeah. You talk about mission from Congress. We need to be on a mission from Congress to implement real, meaningful, sustainable permitting reforms. You talk about sustaining capital for more than 4 years. We need a permitting regime that can be sustained for more than 4 years. I think the problem that we faced in this country is that you have what's commonly referred to as the pendulum swing from one Republican administration to a Democratic administration back to a Republican. The rules are constantly changing, and given that we're talking about these long-lived assets, particularly with the grid, building new power plants, building new generation capacity, building transmission lines, you got to know what the rules of the game are. Because if you start making the investments and you start getting your permits, then inevitably you're going to, for these big infrastructure projects, you're going to get litigated, you're going to get stuck in court, and then the next thing you know, you have a new administration on your hands, and they either take your permit away or they change the terms of your permit. We can't have that anymore, given the scale of what Rich was talking about. Even if that's half off, we still have a huge challenge ahead of us. So we absolutely need legislation to get passed so that, again, for the long haul, we'll have these rules enshrined in place. I think you're seeing in the Hill a couple of things emerge. One is, I mentioned transmission. I think there will be a transmission component to whatever emerges in the permitting reform discussion, but I raised that only because that's not really permitting reform in terms of what's being talked about. They're talking about transmission policy changes in terms of how you allocate the costs to customers in building transmission lines. But actual permitting reforms will certainly help build transmission lines as well. But the trade will be for something probably, hopefully, very substantial on the other side of that. So we're talking about the National Environmental Policy Act, which hopefully will be on the floor this week. I think they're struggling to deal with some last-minute concerns from some members on the Republican side in the Freedom Caucus. The House also passed the Permit Act, which I think is hugely significant because it deals with real fundamental changes to the Clean Water Act, particularly Sections 401 and Sections 404, which have been the bane of interstate pipeline developers, among others. And there was a bill also that passed last week that dealt with the coordination around the certificate reviews before FERC for interstate natural gas pipelines. So some of these things are, again, members are starting to get their heads around how significant this challenge is. And I think on both sides of the aisle, there is a recognition that we have to have legislation. I don't think it's going to emerge here in the next week or 2 weeks before the end of the year. I think this will slip into next year. Probably you could see something on the highway bill. But my hope would be that if Congress does anything at all on permitting reform, it would be that they address the litigation problem, the frivolous litigation that we all see day in and day out stopping these projects. Certainly people should have their day in court if they are about to suffer some economic harm due to a project being built near their land, or if they have a bed and breakfast or anything like that. But if you're talking about these sort of airy, abstract concerns that activist groups bring to courts and then enables them to stop these projects for months and years at a time. If Congress could do one thing and stop that and do nothing else, it would go a long way to, again, allowing us to build out the infrastructure we need. So I'm hopeful, very hopeful we can get this done.
Rich, SEBA and its members have a lot at stake in this activity too. What are you seeing? What are you expecting?
So just as Mike said, we are very excited about and supportive of the legislation that is currently moving through, and we're everyone, fingers and toes crossed, good vibes, going to our friends in Congress, whipping this tonight, trying to make this happen, and hoping we can get something through rules and for a good vote on the floor this week, which obviously just begins the process, and then it will go to our friends in the Senate to carry forward. We do think that there's a tremendous opportunity in this, and that can cross everything that Mike just mentioned, across greater certainty, greater clarity, much tighter timelines. Many folks are aware that there are these massive queues for new generation lined up around the country. There are now increasingly also massive queues for new loads, so our demand centers coming into the grid around the country. Some of those do have to do with the way the power markets have been running around the country, but a lot of what is driving that queue behavior are also just simple delays in the permits. We even have projects sometimes getting through queues that then can't actually build because they don't have their final they don't have their final permits in many cases. So if we're going to do anything like meeting this surge of demand, reforming this set of processes from the federal side down and greatly shrinking the length of follow-on adjudications and ability to challenge permits once they're issued is extremely important. I also think very important to note is that in committee in quite a bipartisan way in the House this time around, I think the bills were even improved by adding additional language which creates more certainty so that once someone has received their permit already or they're deep in the permitting process, there's less chance of any given administration on any kind of energy project changing the rules of the game on that. So offering additional certainty to project developers and off-takers like us and investors that are underwriting all of it. So I think it'll be a very strong step in the right direction with all this. The very last thing I'll say, though, is I do think we have to get out of the mindset that we're going to get just one great big permitting bill done ever. I think this will be a good beginning to a process of reforming permitting, but I hope that over time we'll be able to go even further with all this in the future.
Rich, I'm going to stay with you here to move from the federal level to the state level. States have taken very different approaches to data center development. Some have used streamlined permitting. Others have used new energy sourcing mandates. As federal policy evolves, what combination of state and federal actions would most effectively align state and federal goals and provide the quick access to electricity infrastructure that the industry needs?
We're in a really interesting moment on this right now, and I'll be really interested to hear how Mike addresses this and thinks about the relative roles of the feds and the states. We're also under a bit of I think it might be fair to say, a tussle between the role of the federal government and the state government with the Department of Energy's new ANOPR proposal around large load interconnects around the country. So who will be in the driver's seat? Will it be individual states or public utility commissions in the driver's seat about the way a very large load connection like a data center, or will there be a uniform, federal regime, or at least for certain very large, arguably systemically important loads like very large AI data centers coming into the system? I think we're starting to see some really interesting innovation in a lot of those places. As I mentioned before, a huge portion of the things that have requested interconnects around the country are I would argue, speculative requests. And so that can often gum up the works for the folks that, are actually have chips secured, actually have developed a data center in the past, actually know directly how they're going to use it. And so any reform that starts to frankly raise the requirements, raise the bar to entry so that only serious players can come in and bring realistic new loads into those systems. And so that process isn't gummed up in the same way that the generation interconnect queues have been gummed up, again, by a lot of speculative folks coming in and requesting connection in that, are generally net good. And so that's taken many different forms in many different places. In some cases, the fee to do an interconnect has been increased. This is often called a large load tariff, or the beginnings of a large load tariff in many places. In other places, folks are requiring take or pay contracts, and so you're basically signing up and saying, well, I'm going to be on the hook to pay at least X amount of the cost of this generation interconnect, whether I bring the load in at all. That also, in some cases, seems to have cleared up or at least decreased the pressure. You've actually seen load queues shrink significantly in places that have brought that in, and maybe we're getting a more realistic picture of what's coming in. In other places, we're seeing really interesting new mechanisms that allow our members to bring their own new generating capacity with them into those grids. And so these are called sort of bring your own capacity agreements. I see Charles right here from Amazon in the front row. They just worked out an interesting bring your own capacity deal in Indiana with major new load that they're adding to that system and bringing new capacity along with it. Our friends at Meta and Google and many other places are working on these to bring their own capacity into those systems to sort of guarantee that capacity will be there to serve and that you won't see price increases on all the other ratepayers in the system. The last thing, going back to that point about flexibility, in many cases, you have grid operators who are saying, well, if you can be a little flexible when you bring that load into the system, if you don't need there are 8,760 hours in a year. That's 24 times 365. If you can make do with 8,700 hours in a year, we'll let you connect your load a lot faster into the system, and you figure out what to do for those other 60 hours of the year. So there's a lot of innovation happening in states and power markets around the country.
Mike, did you want to talk on that as well?
Yeah, this is, no, it's, Rich is right that there is a bit of a tussle going on, and you certainly saw that in the reaction to the DOE ANOPR. Certainly in the ANOPR, DOE was very clear, and in fact, they had it in italics, is we at the feds are not trying to come in and to tell you states, we're trying to take away your authority over rates or other parts of the grid that you have long enjoyed. That is not what we're trying to do here. I think NAGRUC had a slightly different view of that, but we'll see if they can sort of reach, a place of rapprochement here. But I think, at least from the administration perspective, and I certainly am not speaking for the administration, but I think Rich made some really important points in terms of what the administration wants to see out of what's going on right now. And Rich talks about a lot of the innovation occurring in the marketplace. I get the sense that the administration does not want to really get in the way of that. Yes, there's this federal state question. It's a deeply rooted question. It's a constitutional question. It is a policy question. But in terms of the things Rich is talking about, I think the administration, at the end of the day, and you may see this down the road, is, they want to issue some principles. They want to provide guidance for the industry. They want to get government out of the way. Where rules need to be clarified, they will clarify them. But at the end of the day, they know that this is a market-driven phenomenon that is occurring here. This is not, sending a man to the moon, which was really government-directed, and government, sat down in a room and figured it out. Like, that's not what's happening here. This is, again, a private sector market phenomenon. And so they want to make sure that they're allowing it to continue to flow and grow and expand and innovate and not have the government get in the way of that. So again, the federal state question is a very important one, but I think from the Fed's perspective, hopefully the states will understand that I don't think this administration is thinking about coming in and big-footing them in some way. Now, look, I understand the president just issued an executive order talking about preempting, state rules with respect to AI, and we'll see where all that goes. But I think on sort of the electric side of things, where you're thinking about DOE and FERC, at least that's how I think they're thinking about it.
I mean, is this one of these areas where some people are saying, boy, we really need FERC to do a whole new regime now, as soon as possible? Or is this an area where there's still a little innovation that could be done, that we should let people try a few different things before we sort of codify a new set of rules that overturn existing? What's the urgency here? Or should we have regulatory innovation for a while? Is that such a thing?
Well, from my seat, I do everything I can to not comment on current policy.
Fair enough.
As the stable, long-term foundation of the Department of Energy. With that said, recently we hosted a roundtable for Secretary Wright with AI companies. We also just recently did it with a lot of fusion companies, and it's really a mechanism that we're using to take feedback. The AI one really led to a lot of the findings, and that came out in Project Genesis and that work. And so, I think the thing that I think about overall, and it's important to note, is AI isn't the only driver of this. I think as a country, we see the need for reindustrialization. And so that electric use is going to increase as we see an opportunity for the United States to start making things again and building things again. So yes, we have an urgent issue at hand right now that we need to address in a meaningful way, and that's going to create change. And then change means opportunity in many ways. And so I think as a country, we have a huge opportunity to regain our manufacturing capacity and capability by utilizing AI. And utilizing this kind of issue that the market has created and be able to do some new and exciting things, as a country but I'm not going to comment directly.
Yeah.
FERC or the Department of Energy or anything like that.
You're good. You're listening to your lawyers. It's very
in my lane.
Well, so Rick, let me ask you. So, what do you see out there when people are talking about technologies that are going to help close this gap between the demand and the supply? what do you see about like sort of new solutions, thinking advanced nuclear, microgrids, hydrogen-capable turbines, versus sort of, you know, currently available solar storage, natural gas?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so tell me about, tell us about what are the newer technologies are close to being deployed at scale.
Yeah, well, I mean,
and what is the role of FESI in sort of closing that gap?
yeah, well, I'll start and end, I think, with that part. So one of the areas that I think that the foundation plays a unique role is really being the external innovation partner of the Department of Energy. So the things that we're looking at right now are, how do we help the Office of Technology Commercialization and Office of Science look at the SBIR programs, look at the LEAP programs, look at all these cool commercialization programs that have moved forward over the years. But really to hit scale and to be in the proper role, it does need an independent agency-related partner. And so that's some of the areas, like in the very short term, from a funding standpoint and the work that we're going to do is how do you commercialize all these energy technologies that are either coming out of government or helping companies that are in the private sector that have a great idea and they just need a little bit of non-dilutive capital to move forward. Really, really, really important role. And we've seen some of the greatest technologies this country has ever created, which are currently being deployed in China and everywhere else, come from the national labs, come from the SBIR program, STTR programs. And so that's really a short-term area that we're looking as something that we can do to be a part of that. When it comes to what's happening on the grid and the space, one of the things that I think is really important that we look at as a country, and I think we're looking at it, but maybe not taking it as seriously because it's just not sexy. Grid is sexy, right, in general. I mean, I think everybody can agree. It's so cool.
Really
sexy.
Yeah, strong support from this panel.
Strong support from this panel. And then, like, to make it even sexier, let's just, like, lay some power lines where they were and do some reconductoring.
Wow.
Really get you up in the morning, right? So that's one of the areas that I think is super interesting and super important is like how do we like actually look at the grid as it is now, and how can we increase our capacity or available electrons rapidly? And so what are we doing in reconductoring? And I think EDF was on the panel before us, and I think there's some really cool roles that they can play. But at the end of the day, it actually comes down to like incentives for utilities to be able to do this. And like, what are those mechanisms that I think people smarter than me and people that have a really clear policy role need to like really be thinking about, because that's an area where we can just increase capacity rapidly, or at least use rapidly, and we just have to lay some lines on some lines, and we don't really have to worry too much about a lot of permitting from that standpoint. And so like that's, in a lot of the areas, you think of like, fusion's going to solve this problem, or geothermal's going to solve this problem, or there's all these really cool, exciting things that like we can all, appreciate and love and all of that great stuff. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, what can we do now that's going to like move this forward in a meaningful way? And so like that's kind of the first part that I think of. I mentioned we did this fusion roundtable, and I would say it's palpable that industry is very, very, very real, and is looking to move rapidly. I think historically, I think fusion and nuclear in general has been politicized as an independent agency-related nonprofit foundation that is bipartisan or nonpartisan, if you will. Like, I think getting politics out of energy is super, super important as we think and move forward. And so really looking at, what are the technologies that science says is going to work is really, really important as a country overall. And so I'm excited really about fusion. I'm excited about geothermal. I'm excited that fission deployments are happening and small modular reactors. I mean, this is all great stuff. But what we have to see is like, what are the financing mechanisms? Like, what is step from SBIR and early stage venture capital into scale, right? And as I go back to speed, scale, and stability for our foundation, scale is super, super important. And that's what we need to actually solve some of these problems.
Rich, some of your members that are hyperscalers are playing an interesting role in sort of funding these technologies to get them deployed, whether it's order books for advanced nuclear or to taking equity positions in Fervo, et cetera. Why are they doing this, and what are the ways that we can expect that this will be meaningful?
It's really exciting, especially for me coming out of my amazing alma mater, ClearPath, and my upgrade at ClearPath. Jeremy Harrell, I think, was on stage here earlier today. So these technologies that I, along with C3 and my friends over at Clean Econ, and lots of people in this room have now worked on for years getting these things advanced. Power purchase agreements are now very real. Big equity rounds in these companies are very real. And that's just incredibly exciting. I mean, I think first and foremost, it's being driven by the size of the expansion in all of this. So, if you're a big company and you're committed to powering clean, but you're bringing let's say you're bringing a 2 gigawatt data center to somewhere like Northeast Louisiana, that would be 8 gigawatts of new solar in that region, right? Because of the capacity factor of that resource. And then if you were trying to actually supply that data center with that solar, not just annually match the output, but actually supply it, it would be that 8 gigawatts plus even more because of the seasonal variation of the solar, plus a fabulous amount of batteries behind all that. And so you really start to get to the limits of what you could do to supply a very large load with a solely intermittent technology approach. And so it's brought in all of these new denser technologies that run 24/7. And so these are kind of being called clean firm now as a category. And that's everything you mentioned: nuclear and advanced fission, existing fission, fusion, hydropower, geothermal, long duration energy storage, continuing use of thermal resources like gas and coal and biomass with carbon capture, all those things. And I think now our companies have contracted for virtually every one of those resources, up to and including fusion. Some of them are very large-scale procurements. Charles, unfortunately, is sitting right in front of me here, so I keep coming back to Amazon. But our friends at X-Energy are also in the room. And so Amazon has made a massive procurement commitment for X-Energy advanced reactor companies. This is high-temperature gas reactors in close partnership with the Department of Energy. They're one of the recipients of the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program Awards. And Amazon's kind of done a whole series of things. So equity investment into the company alongside, I think, Michael Bruce was up here earlier as well, alongside a number of private investors, in addition to the DOE, plus near-term power purchase agreement commitments at very specific sites to deploy the technology, plus a long-term kind of order book building purchasing commitment of 5 gigawatts of that reactor, which is really kind of a market-making move for something like an early-stage advanced reactor company. And so we are hopeful collectively as a community that we can pull forward all these. Just earlier this week, we published or was it last week? Susan Bueller over there is going to kill me. Last week, we published our first roundup of all the clean firm procurements that our companies have done over the course of this year. And in the first half of this year, we did 3.7 gigawatts of clean firm procurement. Compare that to about 23 total gigawatts in 24 of all the procurements we did. But the clean firm, again, because it has those higher capacity factors, when you look at the generation coming out of that, it's a huge amount of generation that we're contracting for with these. And I just expect that will continue to increase. The most recent one, it's not even included in those numbers. It was a Q4 deal. Our friends at Google did their first procurement with a gas with CCS plant. So that breaks open that technology category for our members as well. It's a plant in Illinois from Low Carbon Industries that'll do, I think, about 400 megawatts of gas, but with carbon capture attached in those wells. So it's a really exciting, growing area for us.
Well, terrific. So I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. You obviously have a very engaged and knowledgeable panel here. Yes, Bob Stout.
Hello, this has been a great panel. You know you're in a group with energy wonks when there's broad agreement that the grid is sexy. That was a moment. And you guys are all sexy in this talk. And I'm going to bring it to my favorite sexy topic, which is methane. So what I wanted to ask you about, the Natural Gas Innovation Network, our coalition, is very interested in how we can use the demand for AI, and in particular on the buyer side, to catalyze a lot of these innovations. Congressman Fluger was here earlier and talked about the fact that he took somebody internationally out to the oil patch, and they saw how all of these innovations are finding these emissions, driving them down, and they're emissions of gas. So it's also great for affordability and abundance and all those things. But I'm interested in your thoughts about whether the AI, they want molecules, they want electrons now above all, but they also are interested in clean. So I'm interested in your thoughts on whether that could be something that could help catalyze the continued growth of the innovation in cleaner, differentiated natural gas. Thanks.
I'm happy to start really quickly. So if you, just to go back to that deal I was just talking about, the CCS deal, if you look, Google has published the terms under which it will do gas with CCS, and there's 4 big requirements in there. Just 1, they'll do gas if it has CCS on it, so it's got to have a reasonably high capacity factor. 2, the stuff that they don't capture at the point of combustion, they're going to pull back out of the air with carbon dioxide removal technologies. 3, they don't want the CO2 going to EOR. Personally, I think EOR is a wonderful use for that CO2 because it makes a lower carbon barrel of oil, but that's in their principles. And 4, they say that the methane going into that plant is going to have to be differentiated, right? It's going to have to be low emissions methane going into that plant. Now, they haven't yet settled on specific certification or specific leakage rate or all that. I think that's the process they'll go through over the next couple of years before that plant is kind of up and running. But I think that's an early demand signal in that space. And I think over time that could grow quite a bit as more and more of these CCS plants come up. Just for reference, right now the market for all these clean energy technologies, if you take all the PPAs together, it's between a $25 and a $40 billion market annually, which is sort of, probably 2 orders of magnitude right now, bigger than the sort of the premium market that's being demanded for differentiated methane. So I do think that once these 2 things start to come together, there's going to be a real opportunity for people to actually see some real market upside, beyond just the compliance markets for those Wagyu molecules, as I've heard people these special
That's
ones.
a first.
Yeah,
Just keep getting sexier.
Yeah, that's just
wow.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Here. Yeah, and I'll jump in real quick. I grew up on the Marcellus Shale, so that's where I'm from, what part of the country. And the one thing that I will say more than anything is, the natural gas industry in general has innovated more than almost any industry that I've ever seen, and specifically to that point. And so, as we're moving forward and the work that we're doing, I'm expecting really, really, really big things from that industry on being able to participate in this kind of next new thing that's happening. And I think we see very clearly, especially from the driller side, the geothermal space was learned from the natural gas industry, and seeing how they can play and participate and work together and build on that, on the current industry and the new industry that's coming from that is super important. So I think there's a clear role, and it's a very, very important role, and they're the most innovative people in the world as far as I'm concerned.
Any other questions? Right here, yes.
Hey, it's Ethan again with another quick one for you, but really for Rich and Michael, how concerned are you about AI backlash? We've already seen 2 elections in which higher retail electricity prices became a major issue. Democrats are certainly are now targeting certain utilities and ISOs. Even Governor DeSantis has voiced some hostility towards AI. How concerned are you that the public at the moment is not feeling any of the benefits of AI, but is seeing some of the costs in terms of higher energy prices?
It greatly concerns me. You're seeing the backlash occur in red areas, in red parts of the country too, where you might think they would be a little bit more amenable to, more open to the development. Chandler, Arizona is a pretty good case. If you want a case study in what's happening right now in terms of activists and just ordinary people on actually both sides of the aisle coming together and laying out sort of the parade of horribles as to why data centers should be blocked. Just go to Chandler, but you can go to Georgia, you can go up to Pennsylvania in Montour County. The left and right were, I think, singing Woody Guthrie songs together and taking AI jargon and putting it, replacing out the Woody Guthrie. So seriously, but that's what's going. And then you mentioned Governor DeSantis. So you see what's happening there in these places all over the country now. And I think that was part of the reason the administration and the president felt the need to put that statement out in the form of an executive order calling for preemption of AI regulation. We'll see how that plays out from a legal and policy standpoint. Some say that it could be on dubious grounds, but we'll see how that again plays out if there's litigation, if the DOJ decides to file lawsuits against individual states. I don't know if that kind of thing will help with the backlash. It may actually compound it and exacerbate it. As far as I'm concerned, if you're thinking about preemption, if you look at how the preemption debates over many years have played out, and you can think about the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and the Natural Gas Act, the Federal Power Act. I mean, there was a sort of bottom-up consensus that these things needed to happen. It was good for the country, talking about interstate concerns. I think you could get there with AI, but again, on the ground, I think there's going to have to be a very concerted campaign in terms of developers and those who want this to happen to address, I think, legitimate concerns that we're hearing from people on the ground about noise, about water use, about lack of jobs. Again, I'm not saying I buy these things, but these are the types of things that people are talking about. And so those have to be addressed and people's concern has to be assuaged, or else I think we have a very serious problem, no matter what happens at the federal level if this isn't addressed right now.
I agree with Mike. It's a real problem. Went home to my hometown, Scranton, Pennsylvania, over Thanksgiving, and opposition to the local data center plants was above the fold in the Scranton Times. I mean, it was on the front page. And boy, it's from some communities around Scranton that could desperately use the economic opportunity of a data center, and yet people had all these concerns. They had concerns about the water, they had concerns about the noise, and so this is clearly something where there's going to have to be a lot more education for the communities that these are coming into, particularly on the various impacts. I think people are going to have to see and believe that their power bills are not being impacted in all this, and so I think the community is going to have to do a better job messaging around that and sort of proving out the case that it's not them, it's other things that are happening, or actually show how the impact of these data centers is actually bringing down the costs of electricity in many of these communities. So it's definitely a very real thing that our broader community is gonna have to confront here.
Yeah, and I'll jump in with probably the last thing that I'll say in general, but one of the things I look back on, we didn't say at the beginning of my career, but I spent 8 years as a U.S. Army infantryman. Right now, if we look at the rest of the world, we're in very real danger of ceding being the technological leader in the world. Like, this is very real. Some people say we're 10 years behind China and other countries right now as it is. I woke up every day saying the infantryman's creed, and one of my favorite parts of that was, in the race for victory, we are swift, determined, and courageous, armed with a fierce will to win. And all of those are very, very, very real concerns that we need to address. But as a country, we need a fierce will to win to maintain being the technological leader of the world and to hold our place there. So that's my closing statement.
That seems like a wonderful way to close. Thank you, Rick. That's very good. Will you please join me in thanking these folks for their insights and knowledge?
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great. Once again, I just want to thank everyone for being here. One, for staying throughout this day. I know 2.5 hours of straight content is a lot when you're not like in grad school and just working normal jobs. So this is a lot of energy-dense conversations, but I think it's important, and we stacked it full of a great lineup for this reason. One person said to me in one of the breaks, said this feels like a mini Sarah week, which I feel is like the nicest thing that someone's ever said to me. So we're really excited to wrap this up and tie a bow on it with Ann Blunser from the Ham Institute for American Energy, and she's getting mic'd up right now. But given that fact that we are like half an hour away from double espresso and
cocktails and Negronis and spy-themed stuff upstairs. I hope you guys can all join for the holiday party on the roof after this wraps up. So to introduce Anne, she is the executive director of the Ham Institute for American Energy, and she is based in Oklahoma. Many of you are probably familiar with the Ham Institute, if not certainly familiar with the name. Anne has over 25 years of experience as an educator and an instructor, as well as various nonprofit roles. She's been at several universities: Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Texas Christian, University of South Carolina, a few international as well. Spent time as a Foreign Service Officer as well. So has just a depth of experience on all things energy, the geopolitics of energy, and energy infrastructure. Not to mention just a really impressive communicator when it comes to all things energy affordability. And I think one of the things I love about Anne most that's not on her resume or in her bio is that she is unabashedly and unapologetically pro-free market. You use the phrase free market a lot, which is sometimes not as much in vogue these days, but I think it's important given the economic and environmental benefits that the free market provides. So Anne, thanks for being here. Thanks for closing us out today. I want to first start can you tell people a little bit about the Ham Institute? I know it's a really interesting value proposition where you're doing education, you're doing policy research, but you also have kind of lab assets too to really engage with the private sector on innovative technology solutions. Can you explain kind of the origin of why the Ham Institute exists and kind of what you've done so far?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Nick, for having me, and C3 and Drew and all the partners and everyone that's sticking around. I don't know if it's me or the booze that you're probably about to get to partake in, but I'm happy to be here and always excited to represent the Ham Institute and by proxy, Harold Ham. This organization it's fairly new. I call it a startup. I feel honored to be able to try to help him launch it. I've been there about a year and a half now. And it is truly from the beginning all he has been preaching and all he wants to achieve through the Institute is energy security. And anything that falls within that envelope, and this was 4 years ago before people were it wasn't a buzzword, right? And so anything that falls in that envelope, we cover and we touch. And so when you think Harold Ham, and if you read the article in the New York Times on Sunday, the cover of the Business Review, and we were all worried what it was going to be and what he was going to say. And that reporter had been following all of us around for a year. Literally a year, has been at every event we've been at, has tried to do multiple interviews. We have no comment. And we were thrilled with the article. So if you haven't read it, read it, because it to me really honors what Mr. Ham has done in his career, which has been work with every single administration, Republican and Democrat, to make sure we get as much energy to as many people as possible in the world at the most affordable possible rate that they can get their hands on it, and hopefully then allow more energy to flow into their homes and their lives, just get better and their economies grow, and that happens. And that's at the heart of everything Mr. Ham does and why he started the Institute. So for us and how we're spending our time these days, specifically, is really, really trying to help convene industry and government to, in this time of amazing opportunity and a speed and a pace that we've never seen, make sure that really everybody gets a chance to get what they need for their organizations and their companies to be able to prosper in this time, and to help the U.S. government, right? To help us make sure our economy is strong and that we're getting energy through these pipelines and in these reactors and under the ground to get the electrons to all the great stuff that we get to take advantage of, which right now is artificial intelligence. I'm sure y'all talked about it a lot today. My flight was delayed out of DFW, so I literally just walked in. So I didn't get to catch a lot of the earlier conversations, but we've spent this year, I think we've hosted 12 roundtables now. Many of you have been a part of those. And it has been a real eye-opening experience to get to see, this was last fall, pulling in big tech, pulling in the oil and gas guys, pulling in the nuclear folks, pulling in the geothermal folks, the utility folks, all into a room and everybody battling it out. Here's what we need. And us trying then to articulate that and put it into a format that's not only helpful to those people, but then to be able to come up here to Washington and to our local and state governments to be able to use that information and be as helpful as possible. So that's what I've been up to.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Just nothing really.
Yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah. Let's stay on the AI since we just wrapped up a panel and you had those roundtables. What were the takeaways from industry? I know you guys have put out some reports on the intersection of AI and energy. From a policy perspective, what do you see as the biggest takeaways and the biggest fixes that we need at both the federal and state level to just build more and have that speed to power to meet the AI demand?
Compromise. I don't know if we're in an era right now in DC anyway, and it feels this way in Oklahoma and in Texas, and where I spend a lot of my time. Where it feels like we have all the things lining up that are going to make us be able to do all the things we want to do in a really fast way. But the utility industry needs this, right? The community members don't want this in their backyard. The oil and gas folks don't know whether to amp it up or not because there isn't certainty that there's going to be interconnectedness between it all. Then you've got, tech with this unbelievable life-changing technology that if we can't get them this infrastructure, we are going to turn it over to other adversaries to get ahead of it. And we're not going to be able to lead in it, even though it is our IP, which is a really awful place to be in. And so if we don't start to see a little compromise from everybody, even though we're all singing from the same hymn book, there are little pieces of this puzzle that you're not getting exactly what you want. And so everyone's going to have to give a little to be able to put some things in the works this spring. And currently right now, these executive orders are awesome, but if we can't get, House, Congress, can't get our local legislature, if everyone isn't willing to support it, it's all for naught. So I'm hopeful that there's a little more compromise in some of these conversations that will allow these things to happen at the pace that we need them to happen at.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And something so important for these permitting negotiations is trying to ensure that in that compromise you still get enough substantive reform that it actually moves the needle to build these projects, whether you're talking about new generation or linear infrastructure transmission pipelines. And so not to make sure that these compromises are watered down, but actually still get the necessary votes to pass and get signed into law.
Yeah.
I want to shift a little bit towards energy security, since that's really at the heart of why the Ham Institute was founded and focuses so much of their work on. You said you started 4 years ago. A lot's certainly changed in the geopolitical landscape in the last 4 years. Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, but even obviously China is a huge aspect of that too. And I know you've spent time traveling, kind of around the world and having conversations with our allies to ensure that the U.S. can be a good energy partner with those allies. And so, what are your takeaways from those conversations, for all energy sources? And I should note that, the Ham Institute, certainly not just oil and gas. You really are energy abundance. You do work on geothermal. You do work on nuclear. So when you've had those international conversations, who have you been talking to? What are the outcomes?
Yeah. I've been in Asia 6 times in the past 7 months. Wow. And so what's been interesting through the lens of energy security anyway, I would say that, the inconsistency is very frustrating to the Japanese and to the Korean governments. And so you start to see this volatility and you see things amping up around Taiwan. And these are all things geopolitically that we're aware of and we see the headlines on. And we read probably just enough to be dangerous. But when you get over there and you're talking to the Minister of Energy in Tokyo, and you're telling and talking to him about one thing and moving things in a certain direction, and everybody getting excited about it, and then the next day it's a different headline coming from DC. And so it's what it is. It's dynamic, and things are changing every day. So no, I don't think anyone's trying to slip a fast one by. I think you really have to go into it in all of these meetings and negotiations with knowing everybody wants, the right and best thing, which is more energy to these regions. They are the largest foreign investors in the United States. And so it's tough when you're having these tariff conversations. It's been a really interesting year over there to try to continue to build faith with those two economies in those two countries, because I think to really have influence in Asia and to really have any kind of impact on a counter-Chinese influence, we need them. We need them. And I don't know if enough people are saying that, right? It's really important to get that right. And so what I'm seeing right now is they just want consistency. And so where can we find those places that we can deliver that consistency? There are some things we know that this administration is going to be, a little unpredictable on. And in a good way, keeps everyone on their toes. But for those two cultures and those two countries, that isn't important to them. So we've got to really identify things. One thing we got excited about, we were there last month with Senator Hagerty had brought a delegation over, and we helped host a big convening there at Chatham House with 30 CEOs from Korea and Japan, mostly tech companies, a few energy companies. Mostly tech and manufacturing. But what everybody, after a whole day of talking, kind of at the end, you start to see some themes. One of them was nuclear, right? Like if we can start to at least have some common language around some nuclear regulatory agenda that they know that in the US this is what this will look like, and then they can adjust manufacturing based off of that. They can adjust where they're going to invest based off of that, and there isn't that inconsistency that gets them scared to invest. And so that correlation of the investor piece, of the policy piece, and then of actually delivering electrons to the grid is critical in these conversations. We're seeing that in the Middle East right now. What happened off the coast of Venezuela this week, it is dynamic. It is changing every single day. Most of it is actually unpredictable. You kind of get a sense this is unstable in this part of the world, but who knows when and where and how these certain things are going to happen. And then they happen, right? And we all have to adjust and quickly figure out, how to help solve the challenge. And it's exciting. But, we also, I think, still have a duty to deliver something that we say we're going to deliver to our allies in these different parts of the world. And that is energy security. We can pump oil and gas out of the ground all day long in this country if we want to. And some people would define that as energy security. But unless we have someone to buy it, it's an asset we don't need and as much of. And so it's really important that we keep those markets open, that we keep it competitive, and that we're able to get more out there at a more affordable price. And that only happens with really thoughtful conversations with those different countries and really trying to have a few wins here and there for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's been a lot of things done policy-wise under the guise of energy security that haven't been all that great, that have cost taxpayers a lot of money, have cost consumers a lot of money. Renewable fuel standard comes to mind, but I don't want to bash that too much. But it really, if you think about what has actually provided energy security, it's more competition, it's more choice, it's that diversity. If you look at what's happening in Russia right now and Europe, we've known for the longest time that they've been far too dependent on Russian gas. And finally, it took an extreme circumstance, but now they are learning that this diversification is a necessity, and the U.S. is stepping up in a big way. And so you've worked a lot on LNG exports as well. Can you talk a little bit about that and that leverage role that the United States has to play with LNG exports, both in Europe but also in Asian markets as well?
It is our secret weapon. It really is. And I think if we're able to create and help build that demand worldwide for this commodity that is the most affordable and reliable, and for the most part now a very clean option, then it is the best negotiating tool we have in regard to any kind of quality of life advancement. And I think, and most people would agree that would be a democratic, society in those different parts of the world. And so the more we can work in that direction and really start to understand what this means and make sure there are proper infrastructure for, certain import terminals in parts of the country that haven't had them before. And that's Japan and that's Korea, right? In that part of the world. And they do a pretty good job of it, but they could do more. And they have the capital to do more and to invest more. In those parts of the world, around Europe, for many, many years, those projects were just sitting, and EU wouldn't fund them at all, and it's gotten even worse lately.
Mm-hmm.
I spent first 10 years of my career focusing on Eastern Europe. My first tour was in the embassy in Poland, and we were talking about this in the late 90s, right? Like, why do we not use the North Sea in this specific coastline to get energy into the rest of Europe, to get oil and gas into the rest of Europe? I was 22 years old and also having to literally count fish. I was counting fish imports at the coast every day. That was my very first job in the Foreign Service, and having to double check the baskets of fish that were coming in. And then I'd actually go back to the office, put it all into the very old school computer Excel worksheet, in the embassy, and then we'd get to work on the stuff I got excited about, which was actually energy imports at that time. I think that's just the Texan in me, kind of always excited about how to get more of our resource from the ground to the rest of the world.
How many fish are we talking about? Like per
millions.
Day? Like you're counting?
Yeah, I mean, each basket would have 35,000.
That's wild.
Yeah, and so you just kind of had to hope by weight, and like the old jelly bean game, remember we used to play? That's basically the math I was doing. And I'm an Aggie, so my math isn't, what, most people get excited about. So that's how I managed. I'm like, okay, there are 30 in this one section. We're going to just double check it.
Yeah, fascinating. Let's talk China now. We heard on the last panel, Michael Bruce brought this up. He's been talking about it a lot, just the way that they operate is just on a different level, and that's not to suggest that we should be operating like them and being a communist regime that just finances everything through the government. But when you talk about what they're doing on nuclear, the amount of nuclear they build in the past decade is kind of more than we have operating right now on wind and solar, on like EVs and the cost declines they've had on EVs and batteries. As well as critical minerals and critical mineral processing. How do you see, especially kind of from your free market lens, as the best way to address some of these challenges, particularly I think in the critical mineral space, because we've seen those challenges. This government is certainly, this administration I should say, is certainly attempting to restart that and reshore and friendshore a lot of those activities, but what do you think we need to see to actually make that happen?
The supply chain piece on the critical minerals challenge, I don't know that we're paying enough attention to. Everyone's trying to figure out where do we get this source and how do we get it over to where we need it to be able to actually, build what we need to build with these minerals in order to take full advantage of this opportunity. And that piece just isn't probably getting the attention it needs. We are hyper-focused right now on really trying to make sure that, we're not buying those from China. And how do we stop that? And sure, that's first, but then what? If we don't actually figure out how to get it from point A to point B from an ally or to be able to source ourselves, we're not going to have solved the problem. Someone else will buy it, right? So I'm a little concerned I'm actually very concerned about the critical minerals piece. If we really don't figure that supply chain infrastructure, how to move it, and that's a huge part. I think in general it's the same in regard to China. It is always going to be, always. Nothing has changed here. It will always be the same approach with them. We have to move faster. It's speed, it's speed, it's speed. And so they move faster at everything. So, okay, great. Let's say we have all the answers to being able to secure critical minerals in a way that we are comfortable with, and a way that the U.S. can still feel like we're leading in it and should be. But how do we do it at that speed? And if we've spent that much time on that, where else now are they starting to catch up? The nuclear build is remarkable there in what is happening. And so that's a really important thing to read about if you haven't yet, and truly understand how quick they're able to build. It's basically free, essentially, and the amount of power that they're going to be able to bring to the grid there, to attract to their own grid the kind of data centers and that, the scale that the rest of the world needs. So even if we get it right here and we move as fast as we want to, whether it's 50 gigawatts, it's 100, it's whatever it is, you can probably go ahead and times 10 that for how fast China will move on it and how much they will build. Hello,
I'm not crossing the stage. I'm sorry.
It's good to see you.
Hey, how are you?
I'll give you a hug too. Good to see you. Thanks for
Sorry,
being here.
I was meant to be here earlier, but got called to the chief of staff's office, so I'm a little tired.
That happens. Yeah. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here.
No,
yeah.
thanks for having me.
And they are probably tired of my Texas drawl with a raspy cold right now.
No, I think that's livening up the crowd.
Let's let Jared take most of these, and if I can add anything, I will. But
yeah, sure. Well, Jared, needs no introduction. Executive Director, National Energy Dominance Council. Jared, thanks for being here. We've. I'll just dive right into the questions because I know we're getting short on time and we're close to cocktail hour. You've spent, since you've taken this role, have spent so much time listening to industry about what their challenges have been, and kind of playing the role of firefighter and putting a lot of these challenges out through fixing these problems. What do you see as those biggest challenges you're hearing from industry? I know permitting reform is obviously kind of like number 1, 2, and 3 probably, but are there ways in which we can take what you're doing and systemically change how we are permitting energy projects in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it exactly. That's what I was going to say. Permitting reform. We've talked about it every day at the White House. We've had a lot of progress in doing what we can do from the executive level of taking a 2-year permitting process and shortening it to weeks in some instances. And I did a kind of event this morning focused just on critical minerals, and it's just kind of unbelievable where we've moved over the course of the year of using Fast 41 and using some of the other tools within the federal government of just transforming how mining is done in the United States of permitting. Now, the one thing I say, and this is also, it's tied to permitting reform, but we can move fast to get the permits done. What often slows down and stops these projects are crazy lawsuits that are just essentially done exactly for tactical purposes to stop projects from being done. So we've got a huge mining opportunity in Arizona that could deliver a massive percentage of copper that would help the United States, and it's just been caught up in lawsuits. And so there is one of the things that the president does not want to see anymore. He wants to see projects get done and not slowed down. If we can get the permitting done, we have to have the judicial reform that's attached to it. So that's kind of 1 and 1A of what we're working with Congress to get done now is codify what we're able to do at the executive level on permitting reform, but also look at judicial review so that the lawsuits in the courts are not stopping these projects that effectively are getting their permits.
Yeah, and as a follow-up to that, after 7 county and the SPEED Act, does that get you there? Do we need more than that? There's obviously the Permit Act, which would help with Clean Water Act reform. Kind of what's your wish list to get us there?
Yeah, I mean, the wish list is more than that. And so all of it is progress, and we're working every day with Congress on how to improve it. I think, we're going to go hard, and we want as much as possible in the wish list. And so there's probably more that we want to add. But all of it is progress. It's better than the system we have now, and the more we can codify from what we've been able to do on the executive side. I mean, it's just that's the stability that when people come in, the comment we often get is, hey, it's amazing. We love what you guys are doing. We love that the president has created this council. But how do we know, because we got to plan 10, 20 years down the road, how do we do that if we don't have this written in law? And so That is our top priority. Even now we're working it through these last few weeks of the year. But then when we get into 2026, it's going to still be top priority for us.
Absolutely. And we do have microphones. We can start opening this up to audience Q&A. We already have one already. I'm going to pepper some in as we get going. But while you're here, I want to take advantage of this.
Sure.
Thank you. This is for Jared, Laura Lovelace. I assume you're looking at anything that can be put into a reconciliation package as opposed to the 60 vote, cloture needed to do this. Can any of these reforms, I know this is really broad, be put into that? Or is it just really continually incumbent upon us to lean on the 1/3 senators in blue and red states who are up for re-election and just push really, really hard, because it's going to take a really, really hard push. This is really intense midterms, and it's a huge battle. So I just want everyone to be realistic. Everybody wants compromise, but we're in a massive, massive battle, whatever side you're on. So please lean on those senators, whatever state it is, because as an energy community, we're united, especially the ones that have projects and jobs in those states. So I punt that back to you. Is there anything else we can do just to solve this issue?
I appreciate that. Thank you. You took the words out of my mouth. But no, I do think we can get some things done. I mean, particularly on permitting. Yes, there are always going to be people who just don't see the light on it. But I do think there is more momentum towards permitting reform from both sides of the aisle than I have experienced in a while. And we're getting a lot of good feedback on the legislative side. And we just need to stay on it, because I do think, given the president's just priorities of getting projects off the ground and really putting the onus on people to, explain to me why we don't want energy dominance, explain to me why we don't want critical mineral infrastructure in the U.S., or why we don't want gas pipelines up into even blue states, because their electricity prices are dramatically different than red states. And so the president's taking hey, we want to help everybody. And so I don't see why any senator or representative would be against that, because what he's trying to do is reshape both our critical mineral and our critical infrastructure as far as energy is concerned here in the U.S. It really does not make sense to be against that.
Thank you.
Devin?
Thank you. Perfect question here before that Negroni, right? I have a question for Jared. I'm the Director of Energy and Environmental Policy at the R Street Institute. Great to hear what the White House is thinking on permitting reform and working with Congress. We also know there's a piece of the puzzle here for speed to market that will also be done through just purely the executive, and Congress can address. And some of that will be addressing the biggest energy affordability challenge that's kind of within federal control, and that's on the transmission system. And we know that there's a bunch of technologies out there, a lot of homegrown techs that are sitting on the shelf because our system doesn't provide the proper incentives to utilize the existing transmission system well. And that lack of headroom on that system is a lot of times what's your root cause of your interconnection backlogs in these processes too. So I'm curious what the administration feels are the tools in its box that it can use to pursue just purely enhancing more efficiency and headroom out of the existing transmission system.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I literally had a chart printed out that was walking over into the West Wing today of just power generation. It literally has gone down, but the transmission has gone up. And so how do we effectively tackle that? And so this is one of the things that we're working within the White House on, executive orders that would affect the grid and affect efficiencies within the grid. And so this is a big part of what we're working on now. But I would love to anybody who has projects or technologies that they want to bring to us, because it is a very top of mind topic now of reconductoring what other technologies we can do that effectively optimize the grid. We're trying to stabilize it, which is why we use kind of the 202Cs to keep coal plants open. Now we want to optimize it. Ultimately, the final step is going to be how to grow it. So this is one of the things we want to use the power of the executive order to help on optimizing the grid.
Awesome. Hi, I'm Zach Coleman with Politico. Again, this is for Jared. The administration has been dealing with an affordability issue. I know that the president has said this is not a real issue, but what are you doing to address this? And also with a lot of the projects that are in the interconnection backlog are solar and storage. Is that something that you think can actually address this affordability problem if you actually start to help developers work through some of the backlog and some of the bureaucratic issues that they're dealing with right now?
Yeah, I think it's the opposite of that. I think this is part of the problem. Why you're seeing there's a divide. The electricity prices in blue states that are in the Northeast and California are dramatically higher than electricity prices in red states. And so the states that have followed what the president's energy dominance agenda is, of critical infrastructure around natural gas, around coal, those states are having much lower electricity prices. The states that have over-focused on wind and solar and have not built the natural gas, for example, infrastructure, are now down a path where their residents are paying higher prices than those who have invested in that. And so this is part of what we're trying to solve, is clear out the backlog so it's not focused on wind and solar, and then it is more focused on base load power. And this is why, for example, the president has been all about building these 2 natural gas pipelines up in the Northeast, where we've got one, the Nessie pipeline, that would cut across part of New York to help other New Yorkers. And then there's another one, Constitution Pipeline, which would take gas from Pennsylvania and get it into New England. Some of the highest electricity prices in the country are in New England. And so if you look at New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California, they're sometimes three times higher of electricity prices than the rest of the country. And so getting gas from Pennsylvania into New England is going to drive people's electricity prices down. And so this is the kind of thing, these are the kind of projects the president has been so vocal about getting done, because it's going to help people in the area that need it most.
Yeah, and there's go ahead.
I would just add on to both of those questions. I think maybe it got discussed today. So if it did, I apologize.
No, you're
Just
good.
cut
Go
me
for
off
it.
so
No.
it's not repetitive. But I think, what we aren't maybe talking enough about is, let's just assume we get all of this, right? Let's just give that a yes, right? That's a fun kind of hypothetical to play with. We're going to be able to do this. We're going to be able to build it fast. We're going to get the power that we need to be able to lead, on on artificial intelligence and the data centers and infrastructure to be able to compute what we need to compute. What's happening, though, and I see it in my home state, I see it in my backyard in North Texas, my whole community. My mom is she's the oldest state rep in the state of Texas. And I see this is happening real time. She was standing at a rally last weekend in our hometown, where we have we have a nuclear plant in our county in Glen Rose, Texas. And she and all of our community members are pushing against Oncor, the utility there. And this is a die-hard Republican lady. She's as Republican as you get. And and they do not want the data center to come there. They don't want it. They're worried about their water reservoir. They're worried about all these other things, that just assuming we get the power to them and we can get this part of the puzzle right, there is a major not in my backyard movement happening right now. So if we don't figure that out and be able to, make the sell and the pitch for this being a national emergency, that literally everybody's going to have to sacrifice something in order to get these built in the pace that we need them to get built in. Because what I'm scared of is some overinvestment in energy infrastructure if we're not able to actually get these built at the pace we need to get them built at for other reasons other than not getting the power to them. So there's a huge PR piece here within communities at the local level that really needs more attention than it's currently getting. We are seeing major projects stall because it's not being handled right. We're just, it's something we need to really, I think, spend more time in, so that when we do this great work that y'all are leading and doing, Jared, it's for something, right?
Yeah, I agree, and I do think there's an effort. We do need to push back on the narrative that data centers are going to drive up people's electricity prices or their costs, because we do need to invest in AI. We do need to be a leader in AI, and this is why it's so important, the work we're doing over these next few months of how are we going to set up the grid so that the data centers can pull from behind the meter and not be pulling and raising people's electricity prices, or effectively clarify for the residents, and the hyperscalers will play a big role in this, of how is it going to affect water? It's not going to negatively affect you. It's not going to affect the noise. And so this is where the utilities, the hyperscalers, us from the government can all work together. Because at the end of the day, we are going to need the infrastructure on AI. And but I do think, I mean, this is where the president can lead, and you see him. He's very vocal about it all the time. He talks about AI. He talks about the power generation for AI. He wants to be a leader in it. He does not want the U.S. to be second in it. And so he is very much focused on having the power and the system in place so that we can be a leader in AI.
Yeah, well said, and also underscores your point earlier about judicial review too, so these projects aren't stopped in frivolous lawsuits. Rod?
Yes. Rod Richardson, the Climate and Freedom International Coalition. I wanted to point out, this summit is called American Leadership in Energy Innovation, and America is actually bigger than the USA. Extends from Canada down through South America. There have been some interesting developments that offer opportunities to advance the energy dominance agenda. You know, for instance, we just had the Chilean election with a conservative candidate winning in a landslide election yesterday. Half of Latin America is now conservative, right? And just 4 years ago, it was nearly all left-wing and socialist. We also have the USMCA up for review coming up. And there was a great piece by Mary Anastasio Grady talking about how Mexico has not necessarily lived up to its commitments on energy integration between the economies by having these giant state-run companies. So there's an opportunity for the president to disrupt things and to use our relationships with new friendly allies in Latin America and negotiating trade agreements to tie in the entirety of America into the supply chain that's needed for critical minerals, for energy integration. How are you advising the president? What do you think the agenda is going to be on using these opportunities throughout North and South America to make our energy future stronger and better?
Yeah, I mean, touching on a great point. I do think President Trump has utilized energy and energy diplomacy like no president has before. And so when you look at the trade deals he has done with Europe, with Asia, for example, energy sits right at the center of that. And so the EU, for example, has to buy a certain amount of U.S. energy, and same we're with some of our Asia allies. But on critical minerals, I mean, you're hitting on it, and this is probably where I see that path. You know, we're building this kind of coalition. We've done it with Saudi Arabia. We've done it with Australia. There is huge potential down in South America as well when it comes to critical minerals. And so that's the opportunity I think we have most in front of us. Is there are resources we have in the U.S. There are some that we do not have that you can find in South America. We want to streamline and build up our processing facilities, but some of that can be done with some of these allies. And so I do think there is a lot that the president wants to do and we plan to do with our allies in South America around critical minerals. But you've seen, I mean, no trade deal that has happened, I don't think anywhere, doesn't have some energy element to it or some critical mineral element to it. And so I think you're tapping into just one of the things that I think this president will be known for is his ability to kind of point out that energy sits as a leverage point in all of these trade deals, and so I would expect more of that going forward.
Great. We got time for one more question.
Sorry, James, EG4 Electronics. I'm actually a factory owner in Texas. I've friend-shored some of my power conversion equipment to Thailand. They're still a friend of the U.S. for now, although it's getting competitive in Asia. and also a big partnership with a Korean company manufacturing in Michigan, batteries and power conversion. Just think about the Asian mentality that we're seeing. I think I hear all the time that we're playing checkers and the Chinese are playing chess when it comes to infrastructure control and trade policy. So for instance, in my industry, people are just devaluing batteries. So a 55% duty is not really effectively the incentive to move to the United States. You've got, state incentives for power conversion technology to be super cheap. Are we going to end up moving to something far more functional and categorical in not allowing the physics of a free market to let a state-modified actor like China win control of the grid?
Well, I do think no one has been more effective at using the levers within the U.S. government to close the gap with China on something like critical minerals than President Trump. I've seen the urgency within the White House of using levers like permitting, like Fast 41, like getting funding in there, even to the point where he's completely flipped the script when it comes to working with the private sector at doing debt and equity deals with the private sector in order to move things faster. I mean, we in the U.S. government are doing a lot, stuff that's never been done before from a federal government perspective, but it is going to take not just the federal government, but the private sector coming with the ideas and partnering with us on it. And it is a huge benefit when the private sector goes in and has the U.S. government behind it to fend off any adversaries that are trying to mess with the markets. And so that is a critical element, and I think it's one of the great signs you've seen of success from this first year. You're going to see more of that going forward into the next year. And then it's the partnership with our various allies. And like I said, we can do a lot here in the U.S., but there are a lot of other countries that have the resources and the critical elements that we need. And so building those partnerships across the board are how we're ultimately going to get it done.
Thank you.
Very well said. We are over time. I want to give you both just one last chance to offer any words of wisdom, what you're looking forward to in 2026 that we didn't already cover today. Ann, start with you.
Well, in 2026, I would say the thing that, I want to call attention to is pouring into, and if you haven't already, but pouring into Jared, his team, NEDC, this idea of the connectivity with the interagency work that is happening right now is really unprecedented. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And so it is a really unique time for those of you that are here representing, your company or your organization. We've been doing that all year with them, and it is truly remarkable what can get done instead of having to go to 10 different people to find one. They actually all do communicate. It's awesome, and it really is. It's special, and so I know that takes a lot of work. It's extra work for y'all, and a lot of times when you make the sacrifice to go and work in government, you do it for a variety of reasons, but one certainly isn't to triple your workload and get paid 3 times less. And that's what most of these folks are doing in the DOE and the DOI that got appointed through Trump and Burgum and Wright. And so it's a really exciting time. And so pour into that and show gratitude for it as much as you can, because they're working their tails off, and it's fun to see. And I think a lot of it's going to work.
Yeah, I'll just plus that.
Super exciting.
Plus one that, and also just say they're delivering too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to just be busy and take meetings, but the results that we've seen in a relatively short amount of time has been remarkable.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I would just say, just to echo that, I mean, we do not want to go to events or go to meetings just to have meetings or just to keep ourselves busy. We are entirely here to get deals done, to find out from private industry what are projects we can help you get done, and we are meant to be a resource to do that. And if I look at 2026, we have had a lot of great progress here in 2025, but even the Energy Council was a startup in 2025. Now we know exactly the system, we know what we can succeed on, and we want to even do more in 2026. And so please come to us, talk to us, bring us projects. Bring things to us we haven't thought of before, because that's exactly what we're there to do, and that's what the president wants us to do.
Awesome. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our speakers. All right, it's happy hour time. So we are up on the roof. You can leave your stuff down here, your coats and bags, whatever. It'll be safe if you don't want to carry it up there. It will be chilly. Just kidding. It won't be cold. It's heated and it's nice in there. We will have cocktails. We will have food. So please join us up there and continue the conversation. Thank you so much.